Gentlemen, this is a story that came out of the Great Lakes Ledger, Monday, July 30th, 2018. Man allergic to sun gets a second mask. He gets a mask that actually resembles his face, made so that he could get some protection from the sun. So just like the little girl I spoke about yesterday, this man also has that same issue. Without this mask, as you can clearly see he has on, he would burn up in seconds out in the sun from having this allergic reaction to it. Right? So he literally has a mask. The sun might be a threat to us in the summer when we get sunburnt. But Alex is 10,000 times more sensitive to UV light than most of the people. It is as if he were allergic to the sun, like this 2-year-old girl from Langley. And that was the one I was talking about before. She has a condition called EPP. Alex is 25 years old, and he has a different rare conditioner called xeroderma pigmentosum. He was first diagnosed with the disease when he was a baby, and his skin immediately blistered as the sun touched it. So he has a rare disease, but it's a little different from the little girls, but nevertheless, they're both allergic to the sun. 3D technology. So he used 3D technology and had a second skin mask created so that he could go out with the mask and a visor, even when it clouded. So xeroderma pigmentosum made his skin unable to repair the damage caused at DNA level by sunlight. Thanks to inventor Zoe Lachlan, Alex can now go out with a mask that looks like his face. Lachlan needed 2 months to build the mask for Alex. She used thousands of photos of his face and created a 3D model using 3D technology and silicone. She created a perfect mask which can block UV rays. Wow. You know, it's a shame that it has to be that extreme for some people when it comes down to the sun. Both Alex and his mother were stunned to see the mask. I didn't think it would be possible, he said, while his mother added that even in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have dreamed it up. The first time when she took Alex outside, who was only a baby, his skin started blistering. In a TV show, she shared some photos of the baby with the face, hands, and legs were burnt. The second time she took Alex outside and she saw his skin blistering again. After a visit with the doctor, the baby was diagnosed with xeroderma pigmentosum. The doctors advised the parents that the baby should live by night, so only take him out at night. But the mother didn't want to lock away her son. She built him herself a mask and a visor so that he could enjoy the outdoors. Unfortunately, Alex also has learned difficulties and partial hearing loss. Moreover, he is also at a higher risk of developing skin cancer. Thanks to Zoe Lachlan, Alex's new second skin allows him a safe walk in the outdoors. So this guy was so sensitive to the sun. He spent much of his life indoors, and now he has a mask and can put on some visors, as you see him right here. And from what I understand, his skin underneath is pretty badly damaged. So I guess I can then understand why he would have a mask on. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There are people around that are just so allergic to the sun that if they go out, they burn within seconds. Second-degree burns in just a few seconds. But please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family. I thank one of my subscribers, Dominique, for sending this story. And this is a very important story, ladies and gentlemen. It's one that we have seen repeated over and over when it comes down to Africa. You have the Western nations going in, colonizing, enslaving, stealing resources, and just killing the population just for fun. And just for the idea of getting them out the way so they can steal even more resources from the land. You know, I always say there's a reason why the Most High gave the resources to that dark continent, and the people going in raping, he gave them nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing I am happy to see is the continent of Africa. They are now rising up. They're asking for all of their stolen art back, as you saw in the stories that came out about France that stole over 6,000 pieces of art out of Africa and got it sitting in all of their museums. And they're now pursuing that art back, and I'm glad they are. Now you have Namibia that is fighting the Germans in court now in New York for reparations for genociding their people. This genocide took place between 1904 and 1908. In the country, it's estimated that about 10,000 people were killed. They were drove out into deserts. Women and children were not spared. Many starved to death. Many were shot and killed, hung, beheaded. It was sick. It was really sick. Give me 1 second here. All right, guys, I wanted to show you this video so you can understand the atrocities that took place. Some of you are familiar with Shark Island and the slaughter that took place over in Africa by the Germans. And I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
In the first years of the 20th century, all the racial theories developed in the Victorian age, eugenics, social Darwinism, and scientific racism, came together in a forgotten outpost of colonialism. This is Namibia, but at the dawn of the 20th century, it was the German colony of Southwest Africa and home to an ancient people called the Herero. In 1904, they rebelled against the brutality of German rule. What followed was to prefigure the worst crimes of the 20th century. The Germans committed innumerable massacres and atrocities, but they were unable to hunt down and destroy all the Herero people across such a vast landscape. And when the Nama, another of the Namibian peoples, rose up, the Germans turned instead to a recent invention, the concentration camp. In these camps, the Herero and Nama were imprisoned and enslaved. Thousands were worked to death, others raped, beaten, or simply murdered by the guards. The most infamous and deadly of the camps was at a place called Shark Island.
Shark Island was established for the express purpose of killing people. Anybody placed on that island, everybody knew they were going to die. People knew that, the German officers knew that. If I were to have to use the language of the Nazi period, then I would certainly see Shark Island as a death camp.
The people were back together in Shark Island from all over Namibia. Heroes, Tamaras, Bushman, Nama. And they had cold-blooded murder there. My own family, my ancestors, they were also killed there.
In this desolate place, on the southern edge of Africa, 3,500 people were exterminated with a speed and efficiency that was to become the hallmark of 20th century slaughter.
The genocides which took place in Namibia in 1904 to 1909, they are the precursor to what happens in the Nazi period. They are the precursor. They have the same symptoms in the sense that you can see the bureaucratization of mass killing. And this, for me, is the central thing. It's not just killing for killing. No. It's a combination between killing and bureaucracy.
Today, Shark Island is a campsite for tourists. The Africans who were frozen and starved to death here have been almost erased from memory. But a century after the Namibian genocide, the true horror of what happened on Shark Island is beginning to re-emerge. In a recently discovered mass grave, just a few kilometers from the site of Shark Island, lie some of the victims of the 20th century's first genocide. Other victims were denied even the meager dignity of a mass grave. They became the raw material of racial science. Their skulls, and even severed heads, were sold to museums in Europe and used to prove the inferiority of Africans. The trade in skulls was so accepted that it was even depicted on a postcard.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. It is some sick-ass mess here. We don't need to learn about anybody else's genocide other than the ones that have occurred on us. And unfortunately, the way they have this system set up, you learn about everybody except for ourselves. Well, it's time for that to end. We now have an opportunity to learn about all of the genocides that took place across Africa. All of the things that have been buried in history that we have yet to learn about. There are many videos on the German Shark Island genocide, and if you want to know more, you do have that opportunity to learn. But I will leave the link to this video in the description box along with the article. That way you can learn more about it. You know, at this rate, I just don't know what more to say. But there's far too many things about ourselves that we need to learn, and we're going to have to push aside all of the other things that we've learned that really has nothing to do with us. You know, as far as the Holocaust that went over there, Black people didn't start that Holocaust. You know, that was white people slaughtering other white people. It had nothing to do with us. But the genocides we need to know about are the ones that took place in Africa and the one that has taken place here in the U.S. Now, the U.S. is not innocent when it comes down to genociding us. And we know about the Devil's Punch Bowl. That was the concentration camp one. There were more, actually. That was one of the concentration camps here in the U.S. that was set up by Union soldiers down in Natchez, Mississippi. And they're going to always lowball the number. I don't believe it was just 10,000 killed on Shark Island. I think it was far more. You know, these people are notorious for lowballing numbers. But nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace, family. And gentlemen, this is an update from RT News on South Africa. Expropriate land from whites without compensation. I know they were trying to also make changes to their constitution in order to get the land rights. So we're going to go ahead and watch this video.
South Africa's ruling African National Congress committed on Tuesday to amending the constitution to allow the state to seize land without paying compensation. Currently, over 2 decades on from the end of apartheid or racial segregation, white farmers still own the lion's share of the country's privately held land. The ANC had been buying up some of it for redistribution. However, opinion among lawmakers has shifted, and the majority now support taking land without offering compensation. But for that, the constitution had to be changed. That's the move President Ramaphosa now wants to push ahead with. He says the amendment will help drive economic growth.
The ANC Lekgotla reaffirmed its position that a comprehensive land reform program that enables equitable access to land will unlock economic growth by bringing more land in South Africa to full use and enable the productive participation of millions more South Africans in the economy.
But the plan has been met with sharp criticism from white farmers who have called it catastrophic. Here's how some have reacted.
And we are going to live happily ever after. South Africa doesn't have a land problem, it has a political problem.
This is disgraceful. What an appalling situation in South Africa. Where are all those protesters? Did your ANC explain to you that you won't be owning the land, but will be renting it from them? Won't it be for free?
Well, we can go live now to Benny van Saal, General Manager of the Transvaal Agricultural Union in South Africa. Welcome to the programme. To take the President's words there, how is this going to help South Africa's economy?
No, not at all. You know, South Africa do have a huge problem with poverty and unemployment. And for us, this is a pity that they make these choices because no one will invest in this economy. And we need growth to actually address the realities of South Africa. So we have great concern about this approach. And that is for us not the way to go.
How much call is there from the public for this change in the law? Surely by now a less draconian way to balance somehow land ownership could have been developed.
You know, at this stage, all the land that is transferred under the ANC government, by their own admittance, 90% go out of production. And we cannot afford that because South Africa is a very marginal agricultural country comparing to other countries such as yourself. So for us, this is a pity that they choose this. And now at this public hearings, you have one side, a lot of emotions from people telling that we have to transfer the land back to black people. But there's no argument what are going to be done on that. On the other hand, you have a lot of people to make some inputs. What can we do to make sure that we can run the economy correctly, that we actually make use of the right production factors to make sure that there's profitability in the agricultural sector so that we can have food security. Okay. But the people that were most at these meetings were the emotional people. Now they say the people want that. But what will be the reality afterwards? Will we have food in this country? That's the big question that should be answered.
If farmers oppose this, which clearly they're going to do, what is going to happen?
Well, for sure, we need now some rational thoughts in this country. This is not the way to go. For us, this is a pity that they are going to try and save themselves as ANC because from the beginning, they run this country by means of promises and by means of fear. And now the thing's catching up with them. Every day we have a lot of strikes, violent strikes, that people are not happy with how the things going in this country. And now they still promise more things and more things. And that is not the outcome for any future. And the reality is at the end of the day, the poor people will have more problems. They will have more less things that they can actually build for themselves in the future. We fight for many years so that they can give the people title deeds, help them to make sure that they can make a living in South Africa. Yeah. But at this stage, it's the first time that the ANC start doing that.
The hope from the ANC, what they're thinking perhaps would suggest is that it's going to get closer ties with other countries. But such a tough measure in land ownership, it could lead to the opposite, couldn't it? It could discourage vital foreign investment because property rights look to be not respected here.
Yeah, that is quite right. And a lot of foreign countries already contacted us as an organization and say, if that will be the case, we are not willing to invest in your country anymore. I can give you a lot of examples of people already stopped investing in South Africa. And that's the starting point of economic growth. And if you are going to kill that, and that is what's going to be happening if the ANC go through with this, it will be devastating for this country.
Do you think that white farmers or the white community, when in the past 20 years, should have perhaps tried to give more amendments to the black majority so that this would not have happened? Now, if you were doing it again, do you think that the white community did everything correctly?
From our side, for sure. In 2005, we made constructive proposals to government. How can we solve this problem? And within 8 years, they will have reached their goals, but they sweep it from the table. Why? And until now, it's the first time that they make these promises to the public because they need it for the election. I think the EFF is busy challenging them too much, and now they try to save themselves, and that is what's going on now.
Okay. Benny Van Saal, General Manager of the Transvaal Agricultural Union in South Africa. Thanks for coming on the program.
Now, y'all, you see how he's trying to use scare tactics so they can stay in power. They usually do that. Oh, well, what's going to happen with farming? The farming will go on like it always did. First of all, those white people own the farms, but the ones doing the backbreaking work out in that hot sun are the black people. So don't sit around talking about somebody ain't going to be able to eat and what's going to happen. And we stop investing in South Africa. It's just scare tactics. They didn't pay for the land, and they're not entitled to being owners of the land, and I was reading how many of them can't even produce a deed. They can't produce a deed because the land is stolen. And instead of doing the right thing and say, you know what, government, we're going to give you money so that we make good on paying for the land. No, they just want to have the land. Oh, well, this has been passed down. Yeah, it got stolen and passed down. But no, don't fall for the scare tactics just so they can scare people into keeping the land and usurping all of the wealth that they're really not entitled to. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell. And next time, RT News, put one of the Black South Africans on there to talk. You know, it would have been at least a more balanced conversation than to have this man on there trying to use all of these scare words. Oh, we're not going to invest in South Africa. What's going to happen to farming? Oh, unemployment. Well, all of that stuff is going on while you got all the land. So how worse can it get? That's the way I see it. You got the land and the unemployment is high. Peace, family. War crime hearings on South African tribes that were slaughtered and genocide by German colonialists has begun. And these folks really are entitled, just like many of the other dark races on this planet are entitled to reparations. You know, we know reparations are given out according to skin hue. But ladies and gentlemen, this is why I don't support any of the leadership of this world. I don't believe in none of these people. I don't believe they are the best people that are fit to run this earth. And I hope everything falls. This place don't deserve to stand any longer. I don't support it at all. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
Elsewhere in the world, two tribes in Namibia in southwest Africa are attempting to sue Germany. They're seeking compensation and official apologies for the alleged genocide by German colonialists over 100 years ago. Anisha Sethi takes up the story now.
Germany still shows signs of its dark imperial past. This is Luderitzstrasse, named after Adolf Luderitz. He established the very first colony, German Southwest Africa, also known as Namibia. In the early 1900s, German settlers violently seized land from local citizens, leading to one of the century's worst genocides.
The Herero nation must now leave the country. If it refuses, I shall compel it to do so with a long tube. Any Herero found inside the German frontier, with or without a gun or cattle, will be executed. I shall spare neither women nor children.
To Today's Herero and Nama communities still mourn the dead. Up to 80,000 people were slaughtered. They're battling for the German government to pay for the crimes committed.
You practiced on our people how to commit Holocaust, and then you simply came to perfect it on the Jews. And you apologized, and then you paid them reparations. But because we happen to be of a different skin color, Africans, the German government is saying, for us, it's only an apology, and that's it.
Even the apology came a century late, with the German Economic, Cooperation and Development Minister close to tears when she spoke about it in 2004.
We, Germans, acknowledge our historical, political, moral and ethic responsibility and the guilt that Germans brought upon themselves.
But the government stepped in, saying the minister was speaking as a private citizen and not representing Germany's position. It took over a decade more for Berlin to officially acknowledge the crimes of the past.
The war of extermination in Namibia from 1904 to 1908 was a war crime and genocide.
Namibia has received hundreds of thousands of euros from Germany, perhaps a sort of indirect way of compensation, but that's not enough for the tribes. Last year, Hemera and Nama representatives filed a lawsuit in New York, saying they wanted to be part of the official talks between Germany and Namibia, saying it was the only way to ensure justice.
What happened in Southwest Africa was a genocide and a violation of law, and Germany has not yet really been completely held accountable.
It is unique in the sense that you can find a written extermination order that was issued by Germany to exterminate the Ovahelo Nama people.
Historians, researchers, academics, they will make reference of this case. History will be written, even laws.
If they win, it might encourage other indigenous groups to take action against former European colonial overlords, which could see the likes of Britain, France, and the Netherlands pay a high price for past shames. Hanisha Sethi, RT, Berlin.
There you go. I wish Namibia the best. I hope they get the reparations they deserve. They sure deserve it over anybody else that has gotten it in the past, as far as I'm concerned. No one deserves it more than the dark indigenous people of the planet. No one deserves it more. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. I'll leave the link to this RT News video in the description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace, family. I thank one of my subscribers, Dominique, for sending this story. And this is a very important story, ladies and gentlemen. It's one that we have seen repeated over and over when it comes down to Africa. You have the Western nations going in, colonizing, enslaving, stealing resources, and just killing the population just for fun. And just for the idea of getting them out the way so they can steal even more resources from the land. You know, I always say there's a reason why the Most High gave the resources to that dark continent, and the people going in raping, he gave them nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing I am happy to see is the continent of Africa. They are now rising up. They're asking for all of their stolen art back, as you saw in the stories that came out about France. that stole over 6,000 pieces of art out of Africa and got it sitting in all of their museums. And they're now pursuing that art back, and I'm glad they are. Now you have Namibia that is fighting the Germans in court now in New York for reparations for genociding their people. This genocide took place between 1904 and 1908. In the country, it's estimated that about 10,000 people were killed. They were drove out into deserts. Women and children were not spared. Many starved to death. Many were shot and killed, hung, beheaded. It was sick. It was really sick. Give me 1 second here. All right, guys, I wanted to show you this video so you can understand the atrocities that took place. Some of you are familiar with Shark Island and the slaughter that took place over in Africa by the Germans. And I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
In the first years of the 20th century, all the racial theories developed in the Victorian age, eugenics, social Darwinism, and scientific racism, came together in a forgotten outpost of colonialism. This is Namibia, but at the dawn of the 20th century, it was the German colony of Southwest Africa and home to an ancient people called the Herero. In 1904, they rebelled against the brutality of German rule. What followed was to prefigure the worst crimes of the 20th century. The Germans committed innumerable massacres and atrocities, but they were unable to hunt down and destroy all the Herero people across such a vast landscape. And when the Nama, another of the Namibian peoples, rose up, the Germans turned instead to a recent invention, the concentration camp. In these camps, the Herero and Nama were imprisoned and enslaved. Thousands were worked to death, others raped, beaten, or simply murdered by the guards. The most infamous and deadly of the camps was at a place called Shark Island.
Shark Island was established for the express purpose of killing people. Anybody placed on that island, everybody knew they were going to die. People knew that, the German officers knew that. If I were to have to use the language of the Nazi period, then I would certainly see Shark Island as a death camp.
The people were band together in Shark Island from all over Namibia. Heroes, Tamaras, Bushman, Nama. And they had cold-blooded murder there. My own family, my ancestors, they were also killed there.
In this desolate place, on the southern edge of Africa, 3,500 people were exterminated with the speed and efficiency that was to become the hallmark of 20th century slaughter.
The genocides which took place in Namibia in 1904 to 1909, they are the precursor to what happens in the Nazi period. They are the precursor. They have the same symptoms in the sense that you can see the bureaucratization of mass killing. And this, for me, is the central thing. It's not just killing for killing. No. It's a combination between killing and bureaucracy.
Today, Shark Island is a campsite for tourists. The Africans who were frozen and starved to death here have been almost erased from memory. But a century after the Namibian genocide, the true horror of what happened on Shark Island is beginning to re-emerge. In a recently discovered mass grave, just a few kilometers from the site of Shark Island, lie some of the victims of the 20th century's first genocide. Other victims were denied even the meager dignity of a mass grave. They became the raw material of racial science. Their skulls, and even severed heads, were sold to museums in Europe and used to prove the inferiority of Africans. The trade in skulls was so accepted that it was even depicted on a postcard.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. It is some sick-ass mess here. We don't need to learn about anybody else's genocide other than the ones that have occurred on us. And unfortunately, the way they have this system set up, you learn about everybody except for ourselves. Well, it's time for that to end. We now have an opportunity to learn about all of the genocides that took place across Africa. All of the things that have been buried in history that we have yet to learn about. There are many videos on the German Shark Island genocide, and if you want to know more, you do have that opportunity to learn. But I will leave the link to this video in the description box along with the article. That way you can learn more about it. At this rate, I just don't know what more to say. But there's far too many things about ourselves that we need to learn, and we're going to have to push aside all of the other things that we've learned that really has nothing to do with us. As far as the Holocaust that went over there, Black people didn't start that Holocaust. That was white people slaughtering other white people. It had nothing to do with us. But the genocides we need to know about are the ones that took place in Africa and the one that has taken place here in the U.S. Now, the U.S. is not innocent when it comes down to genociding us. And we know about the Devil's Punch Bowl. That was the concentration camp one. There were more, actually. That was one of the concentration camps here in the U.S. that was set up by Union soldiers down in Natchez, Mississippi. And they're going to always lowball the number. I don't believe it was just 10,000 killed on Shark Island. I think it was far more. These people are notorious for lowballing numbers, but nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace, family. Ladies and gentlemen, I generally do not celebrate the holidays. I don't do Labor Day because Labor Day is actually very racist. It came about during a time when many of our people were shut out of the labor force in America. And this article, what I'm going to do instead is shine the light on the real powerful force that built not only America, but the entire economy on the globe. And that was chattel slavery. Not only did we build the economy in America, but the entire political system that you see in place today also came about through slavery. Without slavery, there would not have been a Congress, a Senate, a House of Representatives, a vice president, a president. All of that came about out of slavery. And they're never going to tell you the truth. They would not have been able to pay for all of those political positions without generating the income off of the backs of our forefathers. So this one is for them. How slavery helped build a world economy. The slavery system in the United States was a national system that touched the very core of its economic and political life. You know, ladies and gentlemen, there are some, even to this day, that will sit in our face and insult our intelligence and tell us that we didn't build America. They built America. This article will even tell you they weren't adequate enough to build America. And it's the truth. And you can see this even today. The ones that do the construction jobs outside, they have a shorter life expectancy. Most of those men that do all of those road construction and they're non-melanated and they do all of this back-breaking work outside, by the time they get in their 50s and 60s, they die. Working out in the sun shortens their life expectancy. And that's really true, that technically they are not adequate enough to do those jobs. See, the sun will tell on you every single time. But let's get into this, ladies and gentlemen. African people were captured and transported to the Americas to work. Most European colonial economies in the Americas from the 16th through the 19th century were dependent on enslaved African labor for their survival. No, all European colonial economies in the America from the 16th through the 19th century were dependent on enslaved African labor for their survival, period. You know, you see how they like to play around with semantics, and it's up to us to correct these things. According to European colonial officials, the abundant land they had stolen in the Americas was useless without sufficient labor to exploit it. Now listen to this. Slavery systems of labor exploitation were preferred, but neither European nor Native American sources proved adequate to the task. So this article is even saying the white man was not adequate enough to do the labor in this land. That's what the article is saying, ladies and gentlemen. It's saying the European and these $5 Indians were inadequate to do the labor of the land. Now, as I get into this article, I'm going to show you how they wanted a specific slave in Africa to bring over here. Those kidnappings were not random, ladies and gentlemen. They wanted a certain slave to come over and do the work that was already doing this work over in Africa. So their claims that we needed to be supervised and all that is just a load of laughable junk. We already knew how to do this shit. Our forefathers already knew how to work the fields and grow things before they got here. And I'm going to show you that in this article. Nobody needed their supervision. No one. The trans-Saharan slave trade had long supplied enslaved African labor to work on sugar plantations in the Mediterranean. Okay, so, and also European slavery was still in effect in the 1600s when we were enslaved. And that's another thing they won't tell you. And I did a video on that over a year ago on slavery in Europe. Now, you know how you always see their boring ass paintings and you see all the nude people. Ladies and gentlemen, those naked people in all of those European paintings were the slaves. Now, they'll try to pretty it up. Oh, that was during the Renaissance. No, that was during their slavery over in Europe. That's why they're nude. They were nude because they could not afford clothing, many of them. That's why they were walking around like that. They were so poor, they couldn't clothe themselves. So all of those naked people you see in the art, those are slaves. All right, getting back to this. So there were also white slaves from Russia and the Balkans, and they were there during our chattel slavery because Europe also enslaved their own people. So they enslaved us and they enslaved their own people. Again, this is a piece of history they will never, ever tell you. The same trade also sent as many as 10,000 slaves a year to serve owners in North Africa, Middle East, and the Iberian Peninsula. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you ever notice how much they have such a disdain for the Arabs? The reason why the European has a major disdain for Arabs is because the Arabs took the Europeans and sold them into slavery all over Northern Africa, which they call the Middle East now, but that's still Africa. You know, the Brits renamed it to Middle East, but that's all Africa. The whole thing is Africa. But they were sold into slavery by the Arab. And we know the Arabs sold and still do sell black people into slavery. We know this. Okay. Having proved themselves competent workers in Europe and on nascent sugar plantations in the Madeira and Canary Islands off the coast of Africa. Now, I want you to listen to this. Enslaved Africans became the labor force of choice. So these were the people already working the fields in Africa. We never needed this white man's supervision at all. These folks already knew how to work the fields, already knew what they were doing prior to coming here. We never needed their supervision, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let me finish reading this. enslaved Africans became the labor force of choice in the Western Hemisphere, so much so they became the overwhelmingly majority of the colonial populations of America. They plucked out a slave that already knew how to work the sugarcane fields, already knew how to grow vegetables, already knew how to work the land. And they knew this before they kidnapped them. Okay, don't ever let them tell you that they had to train these slaves to do what they wanted. They didn't have to train a goddamn thing. These slaves already came over here with skills, and they knew this before they were plucked out of Africa, ladies and gentlemen. We never needed their supervision in a goddamn thing. They couldn't even work the fields. How are they going to show you something out in the fields and they can't even work the fields themselves? They couldn't. They came over there and got a specific slave because we were very capable and knew what the hell we were doing before we got here. And don't let them tell you otherwise. Of the 6.5 million immigrants who survived the crossing of the Atlantic and settled in the Western Hemisphere between 1492 and 1776, only 1 million were Europeans. And listen to this. The remaining 5.5 million were Africans. So at one point in time, there were more blacks in this country than whites. It had to be that way because it was a lot of land that had to be worked. There was no point in bringing. An average of 80% of these enslaved African men, women, and children were employed, mostly as field workers, and that's where the bulk of them were, out in the fields. You didn't need a lot of people indoor because most of the work was outdoors. The cotton, the sugar fields, the vegetables, the fruit, all of that was outdoors. So you didn't need the bulk of your slaves inside. Okay, only very young children under 6, the elderly, the sick, and infirm escape day-to-day work routine, but that's very disingenuous, ladies and gentlemen. If the slaves were so sickly that they could not work the field, or they seemed like they were not getting better, they were killed. Even if it was a child, field hand. If that child seemed like they were not going to get better, they killed them. They make it seem like they were taken care of and nursed back to health. No, they didn't. They didn't even have the patience to let them get nursed back to health. If they could not make a profit off of them, they were killed. More than half of the enslaved African captives in the Americas were in sugar plantations. Sugar developed into the leading slave produced commodity in the Americas. So let me go back up here. And they tell you that enslaved Africans of choice were the ones that were working in sugar cane off the coast of Africa. And who did they get to grow the sugar cane? Never forget that. Okay, so back then during the 16th and 17th century, Brazil was actually dominating in sugarcane. All right. So Brazil was really they had the largest scale of juice that was converted from sugarcane, sugar, molasses, rum. All of that came out of Brazil because of the sugarcane industry. And our people made all of that stuff. All of it. You know why? Because we were making all of that stuff in Africa, ladies and gentlemen. They didn't train us in nothing. I want you to always remember that. Ironically, the profits made from the sales of these goods in Europe, as well as the trade in these commodities in Africa, were used to purchase more slaves. So they took our labor here in America, the profits of our labor, and then turned around and purchased more slaves. So the fact that they had a lot of slaves on their plantation, that was still because of us, because of our forefathers. During the 18th century, and this was in Haiti, it surpassed Brazil as the leading sugar-producing colony. Again, those slaves during the 18th century to work in the expanding sugar plantation economy. The Haitian Revolution abolished slavery there and led to the establishment of the first Black republic in the Americas. That's why they hate on these people in Haiti to this day. They never forgave them for rising up against them and winning their freedom. This is why Haiti is treated the way that they are. And they keep those people very poor and destitute on purpose down there in Haiti. It's all out of revenge for them winning and rising up against the whites and winning their freedom. That's why they're always in the shape that they're in. It's done on purpose, ladies and gentlemen. It's deliberate. It also ended Haiti's dominance of the world sugar production. Cuba assumed this position during the 19th century. And even after slavery was abolished there in 1886, sugar remained the foundation of its economy and its primary export commodity. Throughout the 20th century, sugar was also produced by slave labor in the other Caribbean islands, as well as in concentrated in Virginia and Maryland. Tobacco plantations utilized the largest percent of enslaved Africans imported into the United States prior to the American Revolution. Now, in Africa, our people knew how to grow rice. They knew how, in fact, on the slave ship, all of those seeds came over here for vegetables along with the slaves. They didn't just import slaves. They brought the things that these slaves knew how to grow, the seeds, the roots. All of that was packed on that slave ship as well. Rice and indigo plantations in South Carolina also employed African labor. The American Revolution cost Virginia and Maryland their principal European tobacco markets for a brief period of time after the Revolution. The future of slavery in the United States was in jeopardy. Most of the northern states abolished it. So again, when they tell you slavery was just in the South, they build this entire nation. And they're lying. You did. You did. That's why they want to isolate slavery in teaching you that it was only in the South, just to make it look like, well, the rest of the country, we built it. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. The same people that built the South built the rest of the country. Okay. most of the northern states abolished slavery, and even Virginia debated abolishing it in their Virginia Assembly. You only had an assembly because of slavery. The invention of the cotton gin in 1793 gave slavery a new life in the United States. Now, the cotton gin was created by a slave, a black man, okay? Now, that's another thing. They will tell you they invented these items that made the job easier for slaves. It wouldn't make sense for those things to come from the non-working class during that time. It would have came from the people that were doing the job already, and they were looking for ways to make the job more productive and easy. The shift of the slave economy from the upper South, Virginia and Maryland, to the lower South was accompanied by a comparable shift of the enslaved African population to the lower and west, lower South and west. All right. 91% of America's wealth for this entire country came out of the cotton industry. 91% of their wealth came from cotton. And there was only one group of people that was picking that cotton and making that labor force profitable for the non-working class during that time. The non-working colonizers. Was abolished in 1808. The principal source of the expansion of slavery into the lower South. Okay, and they're talking about Maryland and Virginia, by the way. So the slavery into the lower South was the domestic slave trade from the upper South. So from 1850, 1.8 million of the 2.5 million enslaved Africans employed in agriculture in the United States were working on cotton plantations. This is why so many of your relatives, you heard about them working in cotton, because I know I heard that about my. Okay. The vast majority of enslaved Africans employed in plantation agriculture were field hands. Even on plantations, however, they worked in other capacities. Some were domestics, which means they worked indoors, and worked as butlers, waiters, maids, seamstress, and launderers. Others were assigned as carriage drivers, holsters, and stable boys. Okay, the original cowboy, ladies and gentlemen, were black men. And they took care of the cows and raised the cows. These cowboy movies, white men were not the original cowboys, black men were. Okay, artisans, carpenters, stonemasons, blacksmiths, millers, coopers, spinners, and weavers were also employed as part of the plantation labor forces, and these were skills we already had in Africa, ladies and gentlemen. They're lying well over